All right, hello everyone. I'm Warlord Magni, and thanks for coming to this next installment in the Noob to Warlord fighting series. Today we're covering the basics of Florentine. So we're gonna talk about today the basics, like foundations. So talking about our stances, the different guards, our different shots that we can do, looking into movement, as well as doing combos and some of the drills that we can practice to get better. So, Sean, get up here. This is Sean. He's going to be my dummy or my fighting partner. So, for first off, when talking about Florentine or really any fighting style, you want to talk about stance first, right? So, for our stance, we want to start off with our front foot pointing forward, and then our back foot will be perpendicular to us, and you'll have just a little over waist apart, and then you have a slight bend in your knees. This is very basic to our fundamentals. You want a slight bend in your knees so you can respond. Additionally, with your posture or your shoulders, you want your shoulders in a slant. So then what you're doing is you're giving yourself a narrower cross section for your opponent to see you. Okay. And then now that we have our basic stance, we can then start talking about our guards. So in Florentine, there's a couple of different basic guards that we can work with. There's a staggered guard where you have, your foot forward hand or sword pointed out ahead, and then you have your backhand positioned about halfway, right? So this is a pretty standard guard, and I recommend anybody trying to start working with Florentine, this is a good guard to start working from. Additionally, another common guard that you'll see is it's a cross guard. And so what people will do is they'll go like this, where you make this cross. And sometimes you'll have your left or your backhand, your cross hand behind your sword, or you'll also see it in front of your sword. What the idea of this guard is doing is it stops the chop. So if you chop at my shoulder, it closes that lane, but at the same time, you're also choking up on your lane as well. Okay? There's an alternative or a modified guard from this is you now rest this sword, your back sword, on your shoulder or on your arm. And so you're again closing that lane or blocking that lane, the chop on this shoulder or that shoulder, right? You're protecting both sides, but now you don't have to worry about blocking this sword from attacking, or if you're going to attack with this arm, you can now go over more easily. Whereas if you're here, right, you're in contact, you now have to do a much bigger motion, and that's easier to trace. The other guard that you can go into is an A-frame. And so this is, an A-frame is more used for when you're in fighting multiple opponents and they're positioned around you. So the A-frame is, you're kind of in this like horse stance, and you cross your swords to make an A, right? You see the A-frame. This is one side, this is the other side. I am the hash in the middle, right? So what you're trying to do is you're protecting your body from opponents that are on your lateral directions from you, right? Because if I have Sean here and an opponent here, and I have this staggered guard, my guard is really working well or posted up to fight Sean, but I'm pretty vulnerable from this direction. So if you're in an A-frame, you can now attack and defend from both sides. Okay? Moving into our blocks. Oops, sorry. So our blocks with Florentine is pretty much the same exact blocks that we do with single sword. Check out my day one fundamentals class, right, where you have the house block style, where this is one wall, this is the roof to the same side, the other wall, and then the other roof. But the difference within Florentine is that your swords will block the same sides, right? So I don't want to cross if I'm going to get shot, or there's an attack on this side. I would rather block with this side. right? Does that make sense? So if Sean is going to throw on this side, I don't cross like this because now I'm crossing my swords and I'm now able to bind myself up. That puts me in a bad place. So instead, I block here, and now I can follow up, right? Or I can follow up with the same hand. Same thing for the shoulder slots, right? You build the roof. Okay? So just the important part about that is you block the same sides with the same hands. Or whatever side you're blocking, you block it with that hand. Okay? What else? An important part about blocks when talking about Florentine is you want to integrate your blocks with your shots. So whenever you're throwing a shot, and I'll talk about shots here in a little bit, the different types of shots we can do, you don't just want to throw, here, switch. If I'm going to throw with my right hand, I don't just want to throw like this because I'm exposing my arm. Ah, boom, bad. Okay? What instead I want to do is I want to block with whatever I'm, with the opposite hand for what I'm throwing, right? So if I throw here, I actually want to bring the sword out so I block my arm, okay? So even if I do it the other way, right, I need to bring that sword over so I block my arm to protect myself, because in Florentine, the like basics of what you want to do is you want to take a Florentine fight, snipe an arm, and then you now have a single sword fight, right? And you still have two swords. So two swords versus one sword is a much easier fight than two swords versus two swords. Okay? So now those are the basic principles of our blocks. Let's now start talking about our shots. Again, this is all very similar to a single sword, but within Florentine, it's advised, or I advise, to do a lot of chop shots because this is a very high, fast combat style. So you want to do chops, right, where I can do multiple shots at the same time. If I end up doing wraps, it's not that beneficial because, one, it takes a long time to do this wrap compared to a chop, right? And I'm not fighting somebody that has a shield. I don't have a big guard space that I have to get around because it's just a sword, right? I can do the same thing if you go into guard, right? I can get that arm snipe pretty easily with a chop. I don't have to wrap to get the arm. It's an unnecessary movement. Additionally, when you're doing these shots, or you begin to go from, you know, the single chop on either side, right? You want to now integrate going into combos. You go right then left, or left then right. If you just throw, what a lot of people do is they'll just use their dominant hand in Florentine, where, okay, I'm right-handed, and my left hand is just going to be back here, and I'm just going to, you know, throw, and I'm fighting single sword, but I have the sword that's just hanging out. That's the biggest trope I see with people fighting Florentine, is they don't do anything with this hand, right? What's the point of having the sword if you're not going to do anything with it? They maybe block with it. Okay, that's one thing. Okay, I have this kind of like wonky shield, and I can block this space. But if I know you're never going to throw with this hand, then I never have to worry about it. Does that make sense? Okay, right. So when we're doing combos, shift. If we're doing combos, you know, I can throw, maybe I miss, right? And then I can then follow up with another side. And another thing that's happening here is if I throw way out here, what's going to happen is Sean is more likely to pull his guard over, and then I can follow up on the other side, and there's a bigger opening. Okay? Let's see. Also with Florentine, stabs and hip scoops are really, really powerful. Right? There's that common saying, what do you do to a Florentine fighter? You stab them. Because, right, if I'm in this staggered position, the staggered position is a really great guard to stab somebody in, or to get stabbed, because you have this really nice open lane. You can see the middle of my body. So if Sean is in the staggered position, I can go right between Sean's swords and stab, okay? Additionally, you can go out on the outside of the swords on either side to do the same stab. As always, be careful with stabbing people. I'm going to do a whole video on, or class on stabs, because stabbing is really important and it's one of the easiest ways to hurt people. So if you stab, always try to stab down. Trevor. Stab down, because if you stab down and you end up sliding, okay, you're sliding away. Whereas if you stab up, okay, I can go into the neck, go into the face, and you don't want to hurt your opponent. I know we're trying to hit them, but we're trying to do it nicely. Additionally, talking about hip scoops, so switch me sides. So hip scoops are really, really nice because a lot of people don't protect their hips. And a lot of people, when fighting Florentine, are really focused on this upper quadrant or upper portion of their body. So it's all up here, and it's really easy to scoop underneath the guard, okay? I know this is, a hip scoop is more of like a wrap. This is one of the only cases that I say a wrap is really worth it, because even if you block down, right, if I come with a good enough scoop or the right angle, I can get underneath the guard and still hit that hip. So just practice those hip scoops, right? Do it on both sides. Again, you have the chops, and then you have your stabs. And as always, try to remember to do right then left, or left and right. Sometimes you can do like right or left, left, right, or right, right, left, you know, but try to remember to use your offhand. That's one of the most important things, okay? Additionally, when we're talking about shots, the first shot that you throw, I would say, is very stance dependent. Okay, so if Sean walks up to me in this stance, I would start off in a hand match. I'm not going to get into the like why we do hand matching, but basically, here, switch, because it'll be easier to see. But the moral of the story is, when we're hand match, whoever has the outside lane is more likely to win, okay? And for me, it's really easy to get on the outside, especially in this guard. I don't worry about getting on the outside because I have the inside lane blocked off with this sword. I'll go more into these details in my advanced class in the near future. But here, this is a really nice, safe, open shot that I can just throw, and maybe I can get that arm snipe. Say I miss, I can now wait for whatever Sean's going to do, and I can respond. So I throw, what are you going to throw? Okay, and then I would just double tap, right? Alternatively, if we're not hand matched and we're offset, in this position, I would potentially try to go for this arm snipe on this side. More of the story is, when you're fighting Florentine, arm snipes are a big deal. Because again, you take a 2-sword fight to a 1-sword fight, or 2v2 versus a 2v1, right? So I can get this arm snipe with my right hand, and what am I doing? I'm still blocking my arm and my body with my offhand, okay? Additionally, you know, instead I could go for the Sean's left hand, and again, I'm doing the same thing, and then I can follow up, right? Or I can throw here and then walk in. It also depends a lot on what Sean is going to do. But the moral of the story is, what I'm trying to get across here is, you know, whatever arm or whatever leg is put forward and whatever arm is forward, that's typically going to be the shot that I'm going to throw first. One, because I have the most range with this shot, so I'm more likely to hit Sean. But then it's now easy for me to throw with my offhand or the arm that's back, because this is already in the chamber. Does that make sense? Okay. So now that we have covered our shots, our stances, our movement, or our blocks, we're now going to start talking about movement. Again, this is all very basic to our fundamentals. It's going to be a recurring story of fundamentals are everything. It's just a slight variation in how we talk about it with each of these styles. So with our movement, right, we have our linear forward, backward, right? So you move forward, whichever direction you're moving, you move that foot forward first. So if I'm going to go forward, I'm going to move my front foot forward, and then I bring my back foot up, right? So boom, my knees are still bent. I'm just bringing the back foot up. If I'm going to go backwards, right, I do the reverse. Always try to maintain your guard in the same position. The main importance of this linear movement is this is how I'm going to apply pressure in a Florentine fight. So if you come up, right, range control is a big important aspect of Florentine fighting. If you don't know much about range control, check out my last video. It'll be in the comments below somewhere, or we can talk about it here later. But if I need, right, out here, I can't hit Sean. So I'm going to use a linear movement, whether it's going to be a full step, or I'll do this little half step that I can close in. Or if I'm way out here, I'll do a lunge, and then now, you know, I can fight or do whatever, right? Or if, come this way just a little bit, or if Sean and I are fighting and Sean doesn't feel comfortable, I'm going to maintain pressure by using these linear movements, right, to keep the fight going where I want it to be. Additionally, you can do lateral movements, right? So you move to the right or to the left. Again, you move the corresponding foot, right? I'm moving right, and then I follow up, or if I got to move left, same thing, okay? But the importance of lateral movements here is, come here, Sean, is you're moving online or offline. So here, Sean and I are squared up, okay? Very briefly, we're squared up. This is the center line between us. So we can see some things, but if I step offline, I now see all of this of Sean, right? So no, I'm trying to show you to the camera. Okay, so there you go. Right, so if you're me, right, I see Sean from this perspective, but if I step this way, you now see this part of Sean, right? So now Sean's arm and Sean's hip are really exposed to whatever I want to do to Sean. Okay, so that's the importance of lateral movements and you're stepping online or offline, is I get to see more of my opponent and I'm stepping out of their guard, right? So now it's really easy for me to do this, whereas if Sean wants to riposte or attack me, Sean has to adjust, pivot, or throw across in a different direction, okay? Or in a not, like, Sean ends up putting himself in a bad position if he ends up throwing like this, because now his hips are twisted, he's very potentially off balance. I'm actually kind of shaky standing like this already, right? So it puts you in a bad, or it puts your opponent in a bad position when you step offline if they don't correct, okay? An important part of Florentine as well is disengaging, right? So I talked about this linear movement as being able to apply pressure, but if somebody applies pressure to you, you also need to know how to disengage, right? How do I get out of these bad case scenarios? So you can, I would say, to use a mixture of your linear and your lateral movements. So if Sean is pressuring me and I don't want to be here, I would do a reverse lunge where I'm doing a very explosive push off this front leg to jump backwards. Additionally, what I can do is I can step out. I'm stepping out in this direction, right? So I'm moving out of Sean's range. And also when you disengage, it's sometimes good to throw a feeder shot so Sean doesn't continue. Because if I just back out, Sean has no reason to just not follow me. But if I step out and I throw, prevents, or it's like, hey, I will throw and you do have the potential of dying. Those sort of scenarios. Additionally, I talked about, so that's disengaging, right? So you can step out in the lateral direction or you can do big jumps back. The last part I want to talk about in movement with Florentine is the importance of range control. I already kind of touched up on this, but what I want to focus on is the strategy of arm sniping. And so what arm sniping is trying to do, come here, is, like I said, you're trying to take a 2-stick versus 2-stick fight to a 2-stick versus 1-stick fight. And so the important part is you need to know when I can hit Sean's forearm. I don't want, if I'm trying to arm snipe, there's no point in me being all the way in mid B range, because, okay, now I can hit Sean's body, which is great if I can hit Sean's body, but it's not necessary. Because if, for example, I outreach Sean by, say, 3 inches, there's no need for me to get into B range, because what ends up happening is now Sean can hit me and kill me. But if I outreach Sean by 3 or 4 inches or whatever, I know I can hit Sean's arm, and Sean can't really hit me, right? So that's kind of the thing to think about when using range control is, all right, I'm out here, let me step in, do this little half step, throw, step out, right? Or something like that. Where you're really just trying to focus on the outside or the inside arm of either side. Typically you want to go for whatever arm is facing towards you, because that's what's the most juicy. You don't have to work that hard for that arm. Whereas if I want to arm snipe, switch. No, yeah, there you go. If I want to snipe this arm, I have to step in closer, right? And now I'm more exposed because I'm stepping further into Sean's range. Hit me. Ah, I got hit, right? So just be a little conscientious of your range and how close you are in fighting your opponent. All right. So now we're going to start talking about combos, and then I'll briefly go into some drills that you can use to begin working on your Florentine skills. So with your combos, as I said earlier, it's always, almost basically always, left then right or right then left. Very rarely do you want to go right, right, left, right? I mean, that's okay. It's still good to do that. But continue to use both hands. Don't just let one hand just sit there, because then I don't have to worry about that other hand. Okay? So one of the, another thing that you can do as well is you work one side and then you work the other side. So I talked about this earlier, where if I throw out here, it's going to pull the guard over. Ah, boom. Now I just converted this to a 2-stick to 1-stick, right? Sometimes you can work on one side, right? If they're not pulling their guard over, okay, boom. I can work the one side to pull it even over more, and then I throw over, right? So it's like boom, boom, boom. Something like that. What else? Underhand scoop and flat rep. One shot that I really like to do, switch stance. Go up. So one shot that is a really nice and very simple shot, and it's just a single shot, is you do a scoop underneath. And so what's trying to happen is you throw this scoop. Nope, that's not what you're doing. I guess first off, when you do this, you need to set up your opponent a little bit. So you want to kind of like throw these wraps to get them used to pulling their guard out. So what you do is you wrap, they'll pull out, and then you swipe in, and you get the inside forearm, right? So you wrap out, they pull, and then you just twist, and you're getting the inside forearm. So if we switch it to the other side, just to make sure people can see, right? So I wrap out, and then I come in, boom, very nice and clean. This is, again, very simple. It's also a really fast shot. You have to be hand matched for this to work, because if you do it on the other side, so switch, I can't, if I throw like this, you now pull in, like, one, I'm very likely to end up hitting that sword. If I come in and I come across, I'm more likely to hit the back of the hand, and people typically have their hand torqued out, so this part of the forearm isn't as exposed as easily. Okay. Ooh, no. All right. Additionally, another combo that you can do is high. So then, you pull the guard up, hip scoop, right? Sometimes you just want to throw a fake. You're not even throwing a real shot. And sometimes you do want to throw the shot. Or, you can do the cross and up and under, right? So if we switch it, so up, well, you're supposed to block it.
Oh, yeah, that.
Come on, dummy. No, I'm kidding. Right, or if we do this side, boom, you can also go up, under. Don't hit yourself. That's not advice. Let's see, what else do we have? This is one of my favorite things, and this is now a stab combo, is it takes an offline step. So you come out, boom. Right, so when you step off, your opponent is typically going to expect a shot to come on this side, but then you stab on the inside turn. Okay? You can work this in with different shots, and you can do it on both sides. You're supposed to turn with me. Oh, yeah. Right, where I turn, boom, and stab. Okay? It doesn't always have to be on the outside of the swords. It can also be on the inside of the swords. It just often becomes harder if they're going to turn with you. Okay? Again, another thing without the offline step is you just throw stab. Stabs are really powerful in Florentine. If you have the option to stab, stab. Because it's really hard to block a stab with Florentine. Okay? The last thing that I'm going to talk about really fast in terms of combos is one of the nice things that you can do with Florentine is you can do this inside slot, right? So if we're out here and I step in and Sean doesn't move his guard or has this like staggered stance, I can just slot that shoulder, or I can slot that shoulder. Okay, this is the inside lane shot. Again, I'm blocking everything. And one of the things that you can do as well is you can fake out here to draw the sword out and then do that shoulder chop. Okay. When you're practicing your combos, again, just try to do right, left, right, left. And I would say the biggest thing is just try to practice your left hand. So that's actually a really good segue into our drills. So with our drills, we first now have our shots, or let's see, yeah. So practicing with your left hand, what I typically will do to try to get to work this drill is you can do this stagnantly, where you're just throwing. You have a buddy, you're doing block strike or whatever. I'll talk about that in another video. But basically, I throw a shot, then Sean will throw, and then I will throw, and then we just go back and forth. Doesn't matter if you get hit. You're just trying to build that muscle memory with your left hand. Don't forget to try to practice stabbing with your left hand as well. Again, down, not up. Okay? Additionally, with your drills, I highly encourage to move. Again, like Florentine is a high movement fighting style. So when you move, you need to try to practice to move with your guard, right? If I'm stepping over or stepping out, I need to practice keeping my guard in the right position, depending on where I'm at. Additionally, I would say practice on switching your guards. So if I'm in this right foot forward, practice the flip, right? Because this is another movement that I can use to close. But if you just stay like this, now my shoulder is real juicy. So then that would put me in a bad position. So instead I want to switch out, and now, you know, I can hit, or we can interact however. So practice your steps, linear as well as lateral. Practice the guard movement. Practice using the basic shots, right, on both sides. Practice the combos, right, left, right, right, left, working each side or opposite sides. Additionally, whenever you do these, you know, do a couple combos and always go back to your guard. Reset that guard. If your guard is off, if, you know, we're fighting and then I do this sort of guard, it's now really easy to get my chest hit. Okay? That's pretty much the drills that I have. These are pretty basic drills in terms of just practicing and getting the muscle memory built, especially with the movement of your legs in your stance, your guard set, and then just getting comfortable with throwing. That's pretty much what I have for today. And I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards, but thanks for all of your time and attention, and I look forward to seeing you next time on my Newb to Warlord series. Thanks. Huzzah!